"Tame the bull and I'll marry you," said the Apache woman. What the cowboy did left everyone amazed. The town of Silver Creek was a place where everyone knew everyone, and every face carried a story. It was a small town, tucked between rolling hills and dry, dusty plains, where the sun rose with a golden glow and set with a fiery farewell. On the morning of the annual rodeo, the streets were alive with anticipation. Wooden stalls had been erected along the main street, filled with handcrafted goods, homemade pies, and fresh vegetables. The smell of leather, hay, and roasting meat mingled in the air, giving the town a feeling that was both earthy and festive. Children ran about, laughing and chasing each other, their boots kicking up tiny clouds of dust. The adults were busy with their own preparations, tying horses to posts, adjusting saddles, and ensuring the arenas were safe for the spectacle everyone had been waiting for. Among the crowd was Leela, a woman of the Apache tribe. Her presence was unmistakable, with eyes that held both fire and wisdom and long dark hair braided neatly. She walked with a confidence that made heads turn. Leela was not just another face in Silver Creek. She was known for her sharp mind, her spirited personality, and her refusal to bow to anyone's expectations. She had grown up learning the ways of her people, strong and independent, and she carried herself with a pride that matched the spirit of the plains. Today, though, there was something different about her. There was a spark in her eyes, a playful challenge hidden behind a smile. She had been watching the cowboys ride and compete for years, enjoying their skills but never being impressed enough to speak. As she made her way to the center of the town square, people began to notice her intention. Whispers spread like wildfire. "What is Leela planning? She never speaks to the cowboys like this." She stood tall, her hands resting lightly on her hips, and called out with a clear, confident voice, "If any cowboy here can tame the bull in the next corral, I will marry him." The words hung in the air, heavier than anyone expected. For a moment there was silence. People blinked, unsure whether to laugh, gasp, or shake their heads. Some of the older women clutched their shawls, muttering warnings to the young men around them. "She doesn't mean it," one whispered. "It's just a game. Don't take her seriously." But Leela's eyes were steady. She wasn't joking. Her challenge was real, bold, and daring, and everyone could feel it. The cowboys, who had been enjoying their morning warm-ups, froze for a second. Some smirked, thinking it was a joke. Others glanced at each other nervously. The bull in the corral nearby snorted and stamped its feet, as if sensing the tension in the air. It was a massive beast, with muscles that rippled under its thick hide and eyes that were sharp and unyielding. Only the bravest had dared approach it before, and none had ever succeeded in fully taming it. The mere idea of riding it and gaining control made even seasoned cowboys sweat under the hot sun. From the edge of the crowd, a young cowboy named Jake watched quietly. He was not the loudest or the most boastful among the men of Silver Creek. In fact, he often preferred to let others show off, keeping his skills to himself. But he was no ordinary cowboy. He had grown up on the open plains, learning to read the land, understand animals, and move with patience and care. He had faced many challenges before, though none as public as this one. And yet, as he observed Leela, he felt a strange determination rise within him. Her challenge wasn't just about proving his skill. It was about proving himself in front of someone he deeply respected, someone whose courage and spirit had always fascinated him. Jake moved closer to the corral, his boots crunching softly on the dry dirt. He did not rush. He took the time to watch the bull, noticing how it shifted its weight, the twitch of its tail, the way its eyes darted back and forth. While others might have seen a wild, uncontrollable animal, Jake saw a creature that could be understood if only one had patience and respect. He crouched slightly, running his hands over the rope he had brought, feeling its strength and flexibility. Every detail mattered. Every small movement counted. Meanwhile, Leela remained in the center of the square, her gaze shifting between the cowboys and the bull. She could see fear in some eyes, hesitation in others, and excitement in a few. Most of the men around her were full of bravado, confident in their own abilities, but unsure if they could face this challenge. And yet in Jake's calm, measured approach, she recognized something different. He did not boast, he did not rush, and he did not underestimate what lay before him. There was a quiet courage in him that few could match. The townsfolk were growing restless. Some laughed nervously, others cheered from a distance, waiting for the spectacle to begin. Children pressed against the wooden fences, eager to see what would happen. The smell of sweat and hay filled the air as the bull shifted and pawed the ground, restless and aware of the attention. People began placing small bets, teasing one another about who would dare attempt the challenge. "Nobody can tame that beast," one man shouted. "It's impossible," another laughed. "Even if he tries, he'll be flying through the air in seconds." Jake, however, was not concerned with the noise. He took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on his back, the wind against his face. He thought of the hours he had spent training, watching animals, learning to trust his instincts. He thought of the open plains, the quiet nights under the stars, the sound of horses' hooves echoing across the land. And he thought of Leela, her fearless gaze, her laughter that had sometimes surprised him with its honesty. This challenge was bigger than just taming a bull. It was a test of his patience, his understanding, and his courage. The bull stamped again, nostrils flaring, clearly aware of the tension around it. Jake stepped closer, speaking softly, almost as if talking to an old friend. The crowd hushed, sensing the calm in him, a stark contrast to the usual chaos of rodeo events. The air felt electric, heavy with anticipation. Every eye was on him, every heartbeat in the square seeming to sync with the powerful creature in the corral. As Jake reached the fence, he paused, placing his hands gently on the wood, feeling the vibrations of the bull's movements through the structure. He studied the animal's eyes, noticing not just its strength but its intelligence. A plan began to form in his mind, not one of force or domination, but of understanding and cooperation. He would need to match the bull's rhythm, respond to its movements, and earn its trust in a matter of minutes. Leela's smile remained steady, her arms crossed, watching intently. She had issued the challenge to test courage, but she had also never expected someone to approach it with such calm precision. The other cowboys shifted nervously, some stepping back, unsure if they could even stand near the corral. The crowd leaned forward, sensing that something extraordinary was about to unfold. And in that moment, Jake felt a strange mix of nervousness and excitement. The challenge had begun long before he even touched the bull. It had begun with observation, patience, and respect. The first step of taming the untamable, he knew, was understanding the heart of the challenge itself. And as he prepared to enter the corral, he could feel the weight of the entire town's eyes on him, not just in judgment, but in anticipation of witnessing something remarkable. This was the beginning, not just of a rodeo feat, but of a story that would be remembered for years. The kind of story where courage, patience, and respect for life itself could make a man stand taller than he ever imagined, and earn the admiration of someone as fearless and proud as Leela. The air was thick with possibility, and every soul in Silver Creek could feel it. The dusty plains had seen many challenges, but none like this one, where bravery and understanding would meet in a moment of truth. And so, with a steady heart and clear mind, Jake prepared to take the first step toward the impossible, toward taming the bull, and proving not only his skill, but his courage, his patience, and perhaps in the quietest corners of his heart, his worthiness in the eyes of the woman who had dared him to try. After the challenge had been issued, the town of Silver Creek buzzed with excitement, gossip, and speculation. The words "tame the bull and I'll marry you" seemed to echo from every corner of the square, bouncing off wooden fences, horse stalls, and sun-baked buildings. Children mimicked the phrase in playful tones, their small voices carrying over the dusty streets. Adults whispered to each other, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others smiling knowingly at the boldness of Leela's declaration. Among all this chatter, Jake quietly moved toward the corral, his focus entirely on the massive bull that pawed and snorted with restless energy. The bull was no ordinary animal. Its muscles rippled under a thick, dark coat, and its eyes glinted with both intelligence and defiance. It had been raised in the open plains, unbroken and strong, with a spirit that refused to be tamed by force. For years, cowboys had attempted to ride it, each failing and earning nothing but bruises, broken pride, and respect for the beast's strength. The corral's wooden fences creaked under the tension of the bull's stamping hooves, as if the structure itself was aware that a remarkable event was about to unfold. Jake paused at the edge of the corral, letting his eyes scan every movement, every twitch of the bull's body. He had faced dangerous animals before, but none quite like this. This was a challenge of patience, skill, and understanding, and brute strength alone would not be enough. He knelt briefly, running his fingers over the rope he had brought, testing its sturdiness and feeling its weight. He had spent weeks preparing, but no amount of practice could replicate the tension, fear, and excitement that now hung in the air. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the dusty, sun-warmed air, and allowed his mind to clear. While the town waited, a crowd of cowboys gathered nearby. Most were skeptical, some openly mocking the idea that anyone could succeed. "You can't tame that bull," one said with a smirk, adjusting his hat as he leaned against the fence. "It'll throw you before you even touch it." Another chuckled, nudging his friend. "Even if he climbs on, he'll be flying through the air like a leaf in a storm." The laughter was nervous, tinged with a fear that only experience could teach. Each cowboy had seen the bull in action. Each had felt the sting of failure when it tossed riders aside like they were nothing. Leela, standing in the center of the square, watched the unfolding scene with a careful eye. She could feel the tension building in the crowd, the mixture of doubt, fear, and excitement that made a town come alive. Her gaze shifted to Jake, who moved with quiet determination, assessing the bull rather than reacting with fear. Unlike the others, he was calm, deliberate, and focused, as though he understood something about the animal that the others did not. She found herself intrigued. Perhaps this time, someone would succeed. Perhaps this time, courage, patience, and respect could meet in the heart of a man ready to face the impossible. Jake crouched near the fence, observing the bull's breathing and movements. Its muscles twitched, its tail lashed, and its eyes darted constantly, alert to every sound and motion. He could sense the animal's raw energy and knew that any sudden movement could trigger a charge. He whispered softly under his breath, not to calm the crowd, not even to speak to himself, but to steady the energy in the moment. He reminded himself that taming a bull was not about domination but communication. Every move had to be measured, every step precise. He remembered his father's lessons from his youth. His father had always emphasized understanding the animals, not forcing them. "Force will only meet force," his father had said. "Respect and patience will get you further than strength alone." Those words echoed in his mind now, grounding him as he assessed the bull. He began to visualize the sequence of events in his head, approaching calmly, letting the animal recognize his presence, waiting for the right moment, and then moving with confidence and care. Each step had to be deliberate, each decision thoughtful. Meanwhile, the bull continued its restless pacing. It snorted and pawed at the dirt, tossing clouds of dust into the bright sunlight. The townsfolk murmured, some holding their breath in anticipation. Children pressed their faces against the wooden fence, trying to get a better view. Every eye in Silver Creek seemed to be locked on Jake, waiting to see if he had the courage to step into the corral, and if he did, whether he would survive. As Jake prepared, he noticed the subtle ways the bull communicated its mood. The flick of an ear, the tension in its neck, the direction of its gaze. He had learned that every creature had a language, and it was up to him to understand it. He adjusted his rope, checking for knots and tension, and whispered a few words in a calm tone. The bull's eyes seemed to track him, curious and wary. There was a mutual recognition of intelligence, an unspoken challenge passing between man and animal. Despite his calm exterior, a trace of doubt lingered in Jake's mind. He had faced dangers before, but this was different. The crowd, the expectations, and the sheer power of the bull made this a test unlike any he had ever experienced. What if he miscalculated? What if one wrong move sent him flying? The thought made his heart race, but he did not let fear control him. He reminded himself that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Leela's eyes followed him, noticing the way he measured every step, every glance, and every movement. She admired his focus, his patience, and the quiet confidence that radiated from him. Many men had tried to impress her with bold words or reckless stunts, but this was different. This was skill, intelligence, and respect, wrapped in a calm determination. It was rare to see someone approach a challenge not with arrogance, but with understanding. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty square. The heat intensified, and the crowd began to fidget, sensing that the moment of truth was approaching. Vendors continued their work, calling out their goods, but even they paused to watch the silent drama unfolding near the corral. The tension was palpable, thick enough to taste in the air. Jake took a few more moments to prepare mentally. He visualized the bull's movements, rehearsed his own actions in his mind, and centered himself in the calm eye of the storm. He remembered his mother's words about balance and patience, about listening before acting. Every lesson from his past seemed to converge in this moment. He knew that once he stepped into the corral, there would be no turning back. Every action, every decision would count. Finally, with a deep breath, Jake squared his shoulders and approached the gate. The crowd leaned forward, holding their breath, while Leela's gaze met his. There was a spark of unspoken understanding between them, a recognition of the courage it took to face such a challenge. The bull shifted its weight, sensing the change in energy, and let out a deep, resonant snort. The moment had arrived. Jake opened the gate slowly, making no sudden movements. The bull's eyes followed him intently, and the crowd fell silent, sensing the tension in the air. He stepped into the corral, keeping his posture calm and steady, every sense alert. He could feel the strength of the bull beneath him, the raw energy radiating from its massive body. And yet, he did not falter. He moved with respect, not force, and spoke softly, letting the creature know he was not a threat, but a partner in the dance that was about to begin. As he prepared to take the first true step toward taming the bull, Jake's mind was a mixture of focus, anticipation, and quiet determination. This was more than a test of skill. It was a test of patience, courage, and understanding. The entire town watched, breathless and tense, as a young cowboy and a wild bull faced each other in a challenge that had never been fully conquered. The stakes were high, the tension immense, and the possibilities endless. In the midst of it all, Leela's eyes never left him. She could see the subtle movements, the careful attention, and the respect in his posture. Her challenge had been bold, but she had not expected someone to approach it with such grace and patience. And in that moment, she realized that this was no ordinary cowboy, and this was no ordinary challenge. Something remarkable was about to unfold, something that would be remembered in Silver Creek for years to come. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the dusty square of Silver Creek. The crowd was silent now, all eyes glued to the corral where Jake stood, just a few feet away from the massive bull. The animal's muscles flexed and tensed under its thick, dark coat, and its eyes sparkled with intelligence, defiance, and a quiet challenge. Every person in the town felt the tension in the air, as if time itself had slowed in anticipation. Children pressed their faces against the wooden fence, holding their breaths, while adults leaned forward, some gripping the fence tightly, others clenching their hands in silent prayer. Even the vendors paused, their voices fading into the background as the spectacle of a lifetime began. Jake adjusted the rope in his hands and took a deep breath. He could feel the raw power emanating from the bull, a force that demanded respect. He reminded himself that this was not a contest of strength alone. It was a contest of patience, understanding, and timing. The bull was wild, yes, but it was also intelligent. Every twitch, every snort, every paw stomp communicated something, and Jake had spent the last hours reading these signals carefully. He had to move with precision, staying calm while anticipating the animal's every reaction. Slowly, he approached the bull, keeping his movements deliberate and unhurried. The animal turned its massive head toward him, nostrils flaring, and let out a deep, resonant snort. Its hooves dug into the dirt, sending tiny clouds of dust swirling around its legs. Jake met its gaze steadily, refusing to back down, but also refusing to make sudden movements that might provoke it. There was a subtle dance beginning, a silent communication between man and beast. Every muscle in Jake's body was alert, every sense tuned to the bull's next move. The crowd held its collective breath. They could feel the tension radiating off the corral. Leela stood near the center of the square, her eyes sharp, her expression a mix of admiration and concern. She could see the way Jake moved, the way he observed the bull, and the way he prepared to make his move. Many of the other cowboys had underestimated the animal's intelligence, trying to assert dominance through force. Jake was doing something different. He was listening. He was waiting, and that was what made the moment electric. With a sudden, graceful motion, Jake climbed onto the fence and prepared to mount the bull. The animal shifted its weight, muscles coiling like springs, ready to react. Jake's hands gripped the rope tightly, but not in a way that suggested force. Instead, he held it as though he were offering partnership, signaling that he respected the creature's strength. He whispered softly under his breath, a gentle, steady tone that seemed to carry through the dusty air. The bull's ears twitched, its nostrils flaring, but it did not bolt. There was a recognition in its eyes, a curiosity that matched Jake's own. Then, with a precise movement, Jake swung himself onto the bull's back. The crowd gasped as his boots landed lightly on the animal's strong sides. The bull snorted and stomped once, testing its new rider, but Jake maintained perfect balance. He leaned slightly forward, adjusting his weight, his knees pressing lightly against the bull's sides. It was a tense, delicate moment, and for a second the entire town seemed to hold its breath in unison. And then it happened. The bull launched into a sudden, explosive buck, twisting and turning with raw, unpredictable energy. Dust flew into the air, and the crowd erupted into gasps and shouts. Children clutched each other's hands, and adults cheered nervously. Jake moved with the bull, shifting his weight with incredible precision, responding to every twist and turn, as though he and the animal were part of the same rhythm. His arms tightened slightly on the rope, but never enough to force the bull into submission. He was guiding, not controlling, listening, not dominating. The minutes stretched, each one feeling like an eternity. The bull spun, bucked, and charged in short bursts, testing every limit of Jake's skill. He adjusted his stance with every motion, anticipating its moves before they happened. He could feel the powerful muscles beneath him, the heart pounding, the hooves striking the dirt with earth-shaking force. Sweat streamed down his face, stung his eyes, but he remained focused, his body moving with practiced precision. Every onlooker could see that this was no ordinary ride. This was a man and a beast, communicating through movement, through instinct, through respect. Leela watched, her eyes widening with awe. She had seen many cowboys attempt this, many fail spectacularly, but Jake's approach was different. There was no fear, no arrogance, no rush. He seemed to understand the bull, reading its every signal and responding with calm, measured actions. Her admiration grew, mixed with a thrill that she could not quite describe. She realized that this ride was not just about taming the animal. It was about courage, patience, and understanding, qualities that were rare and precious. As the bull twisted violently to the left, Jake leaned into the motion, keeping his balance, keeping his mind sharp. He whispered again, a gentle, soothing murmur that seemed almost magical in its effect. The bull hesitated, then paused for a heartbeat, as though considering this new rider who moved with understanding rather than force. The crowd noticed the subtle change, their excitement growing into astonishment. This was no longer just a daring feat. This was something extraordinary, a display of skill, respect, and courage that few had witnessed before. The bull surged forward suddenly, then bucked high, twisting its body in midair. Jake's grip on the rope was steady, his legs tight against the sides, his body moving in perfect harmony with the animal. Dust swirled around him, sunlight glinting off the rope, the bull's coat shining in the golden rays. Every movement was precise, every shift intentional. The crowd could hardly believe what they were seeing. Some shouted in excitement, others held their hands over their mouths in disbelief. Even seasoned cowboys, who had faced wild animals all their lives, watched in awe at the display of balance, patience, and courage. For several minutes, the bull and Jake moved as one, a blur of strength, agility, and instinct. It was a dance of power and precision, a test of courage that seemed almost impossible to survive, let alone succeed in. The crowd leaned forward, their hearts pounding with every twist and jump. Children clutched their parents' hands, gasping in excitement. Leela's eyes never left Jake. She could see the sweat glistening on his forehead, the tension in his muscles, and yet the calm focus that guided every move. Her admiration deepened, tinged with wonder at what she was witnessing. Then, gradually, the bull began to tire. Its movements slowed, the wild energy in its eyes softened, and it no longer bucked as violently. Jake remained poised, responding to each motion with grace, patience, and steady strength. It was as if a silent agreement had been reached between man and beast, a mutual understanding born of respect and skill. The crowd erupted into cheers, unable to contain their excitement any longer. People clapped, shouted, and waved their hands in astonishment. The impossible had become possible before their very eyes. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the bull calmed completely, standing still under Jake's careful guidance. He leaned forward slightly, patting its neck gently, whispering words of reassurance. The crowd went silent for a heartbeat, then exploded into applause, cheering so loudly that the wooden fences seemed to shake. Jake had done it. He had not just survived the bull, he had tamed it, earning the respect of the entire town and, most importantly, of the woman whose challenge had inspired the moment. Leela approached slowly, her eyes bright with admiration. She could see the sweat on his brow, the dust clinging to his clothes, and the controlled power in his stance. She smiled, a rare and genuine smile, and said softly, "I didn't think anyone could do it." Jake looked up at her, catching her gaze, and for the first time in the entire day, allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He had not just proven his skill, he had proven patience, courage, and understanding. The bull snorted quietly, pawing at the ground, but there was no defiance in its eyes now. It had accepted Jake, and in that acceptance a story had been born. A story that would be told for years in Silver Creek, of a young cowboy who faced the impossible with calm, skill, and respect, and of a fearless Apache woman whose bold challenge had brought out the best in him. As Jake dismounted carefully, the crowd surrounded him, cheering, clapping, and shouting his name. Children climbed onto fences to get a closer look, and the other cowboys could only stare in amazement. Leela extended her hand, her eyes shining with admiration and a hint of something more, a recognition of bravery and respect that went beyond words. The moment was electric, unforgettable, and alive with the spirit of courage, patience, and understanding. Jake had not just tamed a bull. He had tamed the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it, proving that skill combined with respect and intelligence could achieve the impossible. The cheers of the crowd echoed through the dusty streets of Silver Creek, loud enough to rattle the wooden fences and shake the stalls lining the square. Jake stood beside the now calm bull, catching his breath, his chest heaving with exertion and adrenaline. Every muscle in his body ached, but the ache was nothing compared to the pride he felt. He had faced the impossible, matched strength with intelligence, and tamed a wild beast that had defeated every cowboy before him. For the first time, the impossible felt real, and the impossible had been achieved. People poured into the square from every direction. Vendors abandoned their stalls, children ran across the street with excited shouts, and adults crowded forward, some cheering, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Even the older cowboys, seasoned and skilled in ways that only experience could teach, watched with wide eyes. None had ever seen anything like this before. The feat was more than daring. It was a display of skill, patience, and respect that had touched everyone who witnessed it. Whispers of amazement rippled through the crowd, growing louder with every passing moment. Leela's eyes sparkled as she stepped closer to the corral. Her arms were crossed at first, but as she approached Jake, she let her hands fall to her sides, her expression softening. She could see the sweat glistening on his brow, the dust that clung to his clothes, and the steady calm in his posture despite the whirlwind of energy that had just passed. She realized that this young cowboy was not just brave, but intelligent, patient, and completely in harmony with the animal he had just tamed. Her admiration was more than respect. It was awe, tinged with a fascination that made her heart beat faster. The townsfolk began to applaud, a slow clap at first, then growing into a roar of approval. Children clapped their hands, laughing and jumping with excitement, while adults cheered and shouted Jake's name. "He did it! He actually did it!" someone shouted from the crowd. Nobody thought it was possible. The square buzzed with energy, people pointing at the bull and Jake, shaking their heads in disbelief, and recounting what they had just witnessed. The story would spread beyond Silver Creek, carried on the wind like a tale of courage and skill that few would forget. Jake remained calm, despite the commotion. He patted the bull gently on its neck, whispering a few soothing words, letting the animal know that it was safe and that the moment of tension had passed. The bull, which had moments ago been a whirlwind of energy and unpredictability, now stood quietly beside him, muscles relaxed and breathing even. The transformation was remarkable, and the crowd noticed it immediately. The impossible had not just been attempted, it had been accomplished with grace, patience, and understanding. Leela finally reached him, stepping close enough to study his face and the effort that still lingered in his expression. "I never thought anyone could do it," she said softly, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and respect. "You didn't just ride the bull, you understood it." Her words were simple, but their meaning was profound. She was acknowledging not only the physical feat but the intelligence, patience, and respect that had made it possible. Jake smiled faintly, a mixture of relief, pride, and quiet satisfaction. He wiped sweat from his brow and met Leela's gaze. "It's not about force," he said calmly. "It's about understanding. You can't fight something like this. You have to move with it, not against it." The crowd listened, hanging on his words, realizing that the young cowboy had revealed a truth far beyond mere bravery. It was a lesson about patience, respect, and intelligence, qualities that were sometimes even rarer than courage itself. As the excitement of the moment began to settle, the townsfolk started talking among themselves, trying to process what had just occurred. They discussed the skill it must have taken, the courage it required, and the rare combination of intelligence and instinct that Jake had shown. Some older cowboys scratched their heads, muttering about how they would have failed, while younger men whispered about how they could never hope to match what they had just seen. Every person in the square seemed to carry a new sense of possibility, a belief that even the wildest challenges could be met with patience and understanding. Children surrounded Jake, asking questions about the bull, about the ride, and about how he had managed to stay on. He knelt slightly to meet their gaze, smiling gently. "You have to pay attention," he explained. "You have to watch, listen, and understand. Then you can do things that seem impossible." The children nodded eagerly, absorbing every word, their eyes wide with wonder. In that moment, he was more than a cowboy. He was a teacher, an example, and a hero in the making. Leela remained at his side, her gaze steady. She could see the admiration of the crowd, the awe in the children's eyes, and the respect in the older cowboy's expressions. But she was most aware of the person before her, the young man who had approached a wild challenge with calm, intelligence, and courage. She realized that the challenge she had issued, which had begun as a bold and playful statement, had revealed something remarkable about him. He had not only tamed the bull, but he had also earned her admiration, and perhaps even her trust, in a way that few others could. The bull snorted softly, stamping the ground gently as Jake continued to guide it through calm, steady movements. The tension that had dominated the square moments before had dissipated, replaced by a shared sense of awe and admiration. People began to approach cautiously, curious to see the bull and the cowboy up close, yet careful not to disturb the bond that had been formed. Jake moved with confidence, leading the animal with a gentle hand, demonstrating that strength and respect could coexist in perfect harmony. The story of Jake's ride began to take on a life of its own. People spoke of it in hushed tones at first, then louder as the news spread. "Did you see it?" someone asked. "He didn't just ride the bull, he became part of it." Another nodded, adding, "It was incredible. I've never seen anything like it in my life." The excitement was infectious, spreading through the town like wildfire. Even those who had doubted him now shook their heads in amazement, unable to comprehend the skill, patience, and courage that had made the moment possible. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the square, Jake finally stepped away from the bull. The animal, now calm and obedient, followed his lead, as though it understood that the ordeal was over. The townsfolk erupted into another round of applause, cheering, whistling, and clapping in celebration. Leela approached him once more, her expression softer now, her admiration clear. "You did more than I ever imagined," she said quietly. "You didn't just prove yourself, you inspired everyone here." Jake nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "It's not about proving anything to others," he said. "It's about doing what's right and doing it with respect. That's all that matters." Leela considered his words carefully, realizing that the challenge she had issued had been more than a test of courage. It had been a test of character, and Jake had passed in a way that left no doubt about his integrity, intelligence, and skill. The excitement of the crowd continued well into the evening. People recounted the ride, praising Jake's balance, patience, and quick thinking. They spoke of the moments when it seemed the bull would throw him off, and how he had responded with calm, deliberate movements. They marveled at the understanding he had shown toward the animal, a quality that had turned a dangerous challenge into a display of grace and skill. Everywhere in the square, people were talking, laughing, and sharing the story, ensuring that the tale would live on long after the day was done. Leela remained close, her presence quiet but steady. She could see the pride in Jake's posture, the calm in his eyes despite the adrenaline of the ride. She realized that this moment had changed everything, not just for him, but for her and the town as well. Courage, intelligence, patience, and respect had come together in a way that had captured the hearts and minds of everyone who had witnessed it. And she knew in her heart that this story would be told for generations, not just as a tale of bravery, but as a lesson in understanding, trust, and partnership. As the sun set behind the hills, casting a warm orange glow over the square, Jake and Leela stood together, watching the town celebrate. The bull, now calm and obedient, nuzzled gently against Jake's hand, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had been formed. The town would remember this day not just for the spectacle, but for the courage, patience, and respect that had made it possible. And in that quiet moment, as the excitement began to settle and the first stars appeared in the sky, a new chapter in their lives quietly began, one born of challenge, bravery, and mutual admiration, destined to be remembered for years to come. The evening in Silver Creek was filled with a quiet, satisfied energy. The sun had dipped low, painting the dusty town in shades of orange and gold, while long shadows stretched across the square. The crowd had begun to disperse slowly, their conversations buzzing with excitement as they recounted the extraordinary events of the day. Children ran home, eager to tell their families about the cowboy who had tamed the impossible bull. Adults lingered a little longer, shaking their heads in disbelief and admiration, still trying to comprehend the skill, patience, and courage they had just witnessed. Yet even as the crowd thinned, a sense of anticipation remained, a feeling that something remarkable had changed not just in the town, but in the hearts of those who had watched. Jake stood beside the corral, the bull now calm and obedient at his side. His clothes were dust-covered, his boots scuffed, and his face glistening with sweat. Despite the exhaustion that weighed on him, he felt a sense of peace and accomplishment unlike anything he had ever experienced. The ride had tested his skill, courage, and patience in ways that no ordinary challenge could. And now, as the dust settled and the town celebrated, he understood the true significance of what he had accomplished. He had faced something wild and untamed, not just in the form of the bull but in the challenge itself, and he had met it with respect, intelligence, and grace. Leela walked slowly toward him, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. Her expression was softer now, filled with warmth and admiration. She had watched him face the bull, each movement deliberate, each decision thoughtful, and she had been struck not only by his skill but by his character. He had not sought to dominate or impress recklessly. He had approached the challenge with understanding and respect, and in doing so, he had revealed qualities that were rare and admirable. As she came closer, she spoke quietly, almost as if sharing a secret only they could hear. "You didn't just prove your courage," she said, her voice calm but steady. "You proved something deeper. You showed respect for life, patience in the face of fear, and a quiet strength that commands admiration." Jake looked at her and nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate within him. It wasn't just about the bull, he admitted. It was about understanding, patience, and doing the right thing. Bravery alone isn't enough if you don't know how to act with respect. Leela's eyes softened, and for a moment neither spoke, simply standing together in the fading light, sharing a silence that felt meaningful and profound. It was a quiet acknowledgement that something extraordinary had taken place, a connection that went beyond words and gestures, a bond forged in courage, intelligence, and mutual respect. The townsfolk continued to celebrate in the distance, but Jake and Leela were caught in a moment that felt timeless. People spoke in hushed tones about what they had witnessed, their voices full of wonder. "Did you see the way he moved with the bull?" one man whispered. It was like he was reading its mind. Another shook his head, muttering to his friend, "I've seen brave men before, but this is something else." He understood the bull in a way nobody else could. Children ran past, waving and shouting, but Jake barely noticed them. His focus was on the quiet, unspoken connection he had formed with Leela, and the sense of accomplishment that filled him from the day's challenges. As the evening grew darker, Jake and Leela walked through the square together, the remnants of the day still scattered around them. Vendors were packing up their stalls, horses were being led back to their pens, and the dust of the rodeo slowly settled into the soil. The air was filled with a mixture of the earthy smell of the plains and the faint aroma of roasted meat from the vendors who had stayed behind. It was a peaceful contrast to the tension and excitement of the day, and it allowed both of them a chance to reflect on the events that had unfolded. Leela spoke again, this time with a playful note in her voice. "You know," she said, glancing at him with a teasing smile, "I gave that challenge thinking no one could meet it. I expected laughter, maybe even a few bruises, but certainly not success. And yet here you are, standing beside me, having done what I thought impossible." Her words carried both admiration and surprise, and Jake couldn't help but smile in response. "I didn't do it to impress anyone," he said. "I did it because it was the right way to approach the challenge. Respect and understanding make all the difference, whether it's a bull or any other obstacle in life." Leela nodded thoughtfully, her expression softening as she considered his words. She realized that the challenge she had issued had become more than a test of courage. It had become a revelation of character, and Jake had shown qualities that few others possessed. In that moment, she felt a deep respect for him, a recognition that extended beyond admiration into a connection that was rare and meaningful. The two walked further, moving toward the outskirts of the town, where the plain stretched wide and open under the fading sunlight. The bull followed calmly, guided by Jake, who had learned to communicate with it through subtle movements and gestures. The animal's energy was no longer wild or defiant. It had found trust in him, and in that trust, Jake saw a reflection of the understanding he and Leela had begun to share. It was a moment of harmony, not just with the animal, but with the spirit of the land, the town, and the people who had witnessed the day's events. As they reached a quiet area away from the crowd, Leela stopped and looked at Jake, her eyes filled with an emotion that was difficult to name. "Today changed everything," she said softly. "Not just for you or for the town, but for me as well. I never expected someone to rise to the challenge with such patience and intelligence. I've seen bravery, but this is different. This is extraordinary." Jake met her gaze, understanding the depth of what she meant. It wasn't just about taming a bull. It was about the way courage, patience, and respect could change hearts, inspire others, and create connections that would last a lifetime. In the days that followed, the story of Jake's ride spread beyond Silver Creek. Travelers passing through the town heard of the young cowboy who had tamed the untamable bull, and soon, people from nearby towns came to hear the tale firsthand. The story was told in hushed awe at first, then in excited shouts and laughter, as details of Jake's skill, patience, and respect were recounted. Each retelling emphasized not only the physical feat, but the intelligence, calm, and bravery that had made it possible. The town's sense of pride grew, and Jake became more than a local hero. He became a symbol of what courage, patience, and understanding could accomplish. Leela and Jake spent time together in the days that followed, reflecting on the events of the challenge and the bond that had been formed. They talked about life, courage, and the lessons that could be learned from understanding both animals and people. The respect they had developed for each other grew into something deeper, built on trust, admiration, and shared experiences. For Leela, it was a rare moment of connection with someone who had met a bold challenge with intelligence and grace. For Jake, it was a recognition that true courage was not only about action, but about thoughtfulness, patience, and respect for others. The bull, now calm and obedient, became a part of their daily routine. Jake cared for it, guiding it with patience and gentle authority, teaching it to trust him even further. The town watched as the young cowboy and the bull moved together, a symbol of harmony between human and nature. It was a living reminder that challenges could be met, that obstacles could be overcome, and that respect, patience, and courage were always rewarded. As weeks passed, the connection between Jake and Leela deepened. Their shared experiences and mutual admiration grew into a bond that was undeniable. People in the town began to notice, whispering about how the two seemed drawn to each other, how their respect and trust had blossomed into something meaningful. But beyond the whispers, it was clear to both of them that the day's events had created a foundation for something lasting, a partnership built on courage, understanding, and mutual admiration. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills once more, painting the town in golden light, Leela turned to Jake with a smile that held warmth, respect, and a quiet joy. "I issued a challenge thinking it was just a bold statement," she said. "I never imagined it would lead to this, to seeing who you really are and how incredible courage and patience can be when combined." Jake looked at her, his heart steady and full, understanding that this moment was the beginning of something larger than either of them had imagined. They walked together through the quiet streets of Silver Creek, the bull following calmly behind, as the town settled into the evening. The stars began to appear in the sky, twinkling above the plains, a reminder of the endless possibilities that life held. And in that quiet moment, Jake and Leela knew that they had experienced something extraordinary. They had faced a challenge together, one that had tested courage, patience, and understanding, and had emerged not only victorious but connected in a way that would endure for a lifetime. The story of Jake and the bull became a legend in Silver Creek. Parents told it to their children, cowboys recounted it in the saloons, and travelers spoke of it in awe. It was a tale not just of bravery, but of respect, patience, and the power of understanding. And for Jake and Leela, it was the beginning of a shared journey, a partnership built on admiration, courage, and the quiet knowledge that they had faced something impossible and had succeeded together. In the end, the day had been about more than a rodeo challenge. It had been about trust, respect, and the bonds that could form when courage met patience. It had been about a young cowboy proving not just his skill but his heart. And it had been about an Apache woman whose challenge had inspired not just a remarkable feat, but a lasting connection that would shape the lives of both of them, and the town of Silver Creek, for years to come.